Hey everyone, welcome to Indie Film Grit, a podcast about indie films and indie filmmakers. I am your host, Timothy Patrick, but you can call me Tim. In this episode, we're going to talk about composing music for indie films. And joining us today is Dom Aiken, a talented composer, musician, and winner of 3 Global Music Awards. Dom has a ton of experience scoring indie films, and he shares some very insightful stories. Let's get into it. And here we are with Dom Aiken. Dom, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man.
Good.
Thanks for having me out.
Thanks for being on the podcast. So, Dom, you are a composer for film.
Yes. I like to say composer first.
Composer.
Yeah, I actually, my big passion is like classical music.
Awesome.
And orchestra music. And interesting, like as I was, finding my way in it, I was like always drawn to film, and film's been a big part of what I do. And I really like the idea of how many people you can reach through film.
Yeah.
But as I've grown, I've found that, classical music, or it's more contemporary classical, but orchestra music, I found a freedom in that. Film is a totally different beast. You got a lot of different hats you have to wear. And one thing that's always fascinated me about music is, growing up, I was, stuck to the radio and headphones on or whatever. And it is the time machine that exists with songs. When you listen to a song, you're like, you can pull back that emotion, from like an experience, a time, a friendship, or whatever, a love. And it's so powerful. And it's like, it was yesterday. And we're talking something that was 10, 20 years ago or whatever.
Totally.
Or something that, what's even greater to me is when you hear a song that you totally forgot about. And then you listen to it and you're like, oh my gosh. And then these memories fly back.
It's amazing. It's definitely one of the most powerful senses.
Yeah, I did hear a guy recently that described it, and he was just saying, like, he was talking about film music and music in general, but like, music is raw emotion. And it really is, because, when I'm sitting down to write, and when I'm looking at the film, I'm figuring out what is going on here and what do I want people to feel. And I think one thing that people really, they know it, but they don't remember it, is how auditory we are as human beings.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about animals and them out in the wilderness and how their ears are perked and they really like are checking sounds. You guys, cool animals with bats that can bounce off things with the sound.
Sure.
It's amazing.
Sonar,
but ultimately, it's like, and I think for me, and growing up, in my experience was very much, in headphones, and I was like, eyes were closed, and I was just living in that.
Yeah.
And so I do think that my music does portray that, because people always come to me and they're like, dude, I saw that. Like, and then there's no film, this is just something I wrote that was a concert piece. And they're like, I saw this whole thing in my head. And I'm like, that's the experience.
And that's the type of composer filmmakers want to work with, because if we're talking on an emotional level, we can communicate.
Right.
And
it's not necessary to know the jargon, not necessarily for you, but like I think a lot of directors that I've come across and panels and stuff like that, a lot of them are kind of scared of composers. And it's like, I don't know, like our job is to communicate.
Right.
And ultimately we're human beings. So it's like as long as we can communicate in anything, let's do it. You don't have to know my side, and I don't know your side.
Yeah.
We're familiar enough to function, obviously to work, but it's that dialogue or that connection that you develop that ultimately makes those great teams.
When you are, let's say, hopping on a new film project to compose the score, what is that process like, and how much, in your experience, does the director usually have input?
Well, that definitely varies, like, per project and based off of the director and how, hands-on they are, or how in specific they are about what they want or what they're getting. I have one director that I'm working with now, doesn't tell me a thing. Literally drops it in my lap and says, all right, man, you got a week, or whatever.
And that's cool too, right?
And you know what? Like, at first I hated it because I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't guess. Like, you want me to guess what you want here? Like it was frustrating.
Yeah.
And we've been working on a project probably now 6 months. We've got it dialed in, and he loves it. He doesn't have to deal with me. And I love that I don't have to deal with him.
Yeah.
To a point. Like, I mean, he's a wonderful human being. That's
Sure.
not how I meant it, but it's like we
Well, if you surprise him and it works.
Oh, I floor him, man.
Yeah.
Like he always comes back. I get so much, positive feedback on it. And he's like, I love it. He's like, he nailed it. It was perfect. And it took me a little while. And it took me at first, they call like spotting sessions. And usually in a spotting session, you sit down with the director and you go through, watch the film, and you say, here, I want to do this, there, I want to do that. And, in the various projects that I've worked on, it always hasn't been a practical situation to sit down. And even a phone call could sometimes be helpful. You could Skype if you wanted to, depending on the situation. But, and specifically, I'll give the last 2 projects that I'm working on right now. And the one guy just drops it in my lap. I've worked out where I understand what he wants. And in the film, I deliver, like I'm watching the film and I hate to say I'm guessing, but I'm like, well, it looks like he's trying to do these things. And
Intuitive.
So I'm like, all your information is on the screen. So I'm like, I really sit down, and it takes me a couple days of sitting there and going, okay, what are we doing? Or what am I doing? And then I give it to him, and he's like, you nailed it. It was perfect. I love it. It's great. This other director that I'm working with, it was pretty funny because we chit-chatted a little bit, and I think we were talking about sitting down for a spotting session, and I don't know why it didn't quite work out, but he ended up having this night where he was just like on a tear of with his computer, typing up his notes for me. And he like hit the zone, and he gave me like 3 pages of notes. It's a short film. I think it's like 15 minutes. And it was so detailed. He's like, here, I want this, here, I want this, here, I want this, I want this mood, this vibe. And he kept saying, I don't want to like this. I might want to like, don't do, wow. And I was like, I looked at it, I was like, we're looking at the same film, there was a lot of notes. But you know what? As I dug into it, I was like, I know exactly what you want, and we didn't have to sit down. I'm not saying that it's a negative thing, but I have this reference, notes just sitting right there on my desktop that I pull up, and each scene I'm getting to, he's got details about the characters that aren't exactly obvious in the film, because obviously he developed them or whatever, but it has to be an ego check, because I'm like,
that's right.
You're telling me what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And I was like, I'm an artist, man. I gotta, and I think there's always an instant that you start to feel like, who is this person? And then I'm like, wait, they just basically gave me the roadmap.
Exactly.
And I was like, this is fantastic.
You can get it done in no time, no guesswork, no nothing.
Yeah, well, because I've done some projects where it was guesswork, literally. Yeah. And I would ask questions, and they're like, what? And I would communicate with them, and we weren't meeting on these particular projects. And I remember, like, literally I'm just like throwing stuff on there to see if it works. And that's a lot of what we do as well, because there's a frustrating point as a composer, because I think sometimes a director, it's like they know what they want, but they don't. They know what they don't want. If, they're not sure what they want.
They need to see what you try first and then say, that's not quite it.
Right. And which is understandable to a point, but there's also a lot of time wasted. And so, there's a good, a lot of the Hans Zimmer guys, they'll do like 6 different, one scene 6 different ways.
Wow.
And show them, because we have these great softwares where I can export a movie file with whatever the heck I want to put on it, like that. So I can send you 6 of one scene, and then you as a director can view it and decide, is that what I like? Actually, I really like that one.
When it comes to budget, how much does the size of the budget impact the quality of the score?
That is a trick question.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you could do the most amazing score for free.
And with nothing. That's what I think. I actually think that it's probably more hindering having like a big budget project. I do a lot of indie films. That's my thing. And
that's why you're here on the Indie Film Great podcast.
Yeah, and it is actually interesting because there was this article I just read that I really wanted to bring up on this, because it was a Danny Elfman article that I thought was very relevant to especially this question. And it, as I've grown, I've actually enjoyed more the indie, market for the creativity. Like, I fall into that category of a real artist, if you will. But ultimately, it's the creativity, because I'm looking at and listening to what is required of the project, because you can't bring, that artistic vision always to a project, if you will. Like, it's like, hey man, this is what it is. The interesting thing is, because I was classically trained in Denver, but I realized at that point as well, I was like, man, I sound like a classical composer. I ain't gonna get work doing that. This is garbage. It's already been done. And those guys did it so well. There's no way I'm gonna top that. So I was like, I definitely need to get a contemporary, kick. And so I went to Cal Arts. Then I went way the other way, and it was like so contemporary. There's a lot of that music that's very unlistenable. I think, that's experimental, and it serves a purpose. And not all of it. I'm not,
You push your limits. You know where you fall.
Yeah. So it's nice that I have this nice classical background. I got this great, experimental side. I got to dive into electronics and stuff like that. So now I just finished my third album, which is doing well, by the way. I got 3 awards at the Global Music Awards. I'm pretty excited for that.
That just happened too. You were saying
just happened.
Just happened
on Friday. I found out.
Amazing.
So.
And you got 3 of them?
3, yeah.
3 awards.
And,
what were those for?
I got they do like a medal system, like gold, silver, bronze. But I got
beautiful.
all silver medals in composer and composition, album, and creativity and originality. So pretty excited for that. I think as a composer, you kind of want to do well in that.
Oh yeah,
composer, right?
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. So next, I'm working towards the Grammys and applying for that. So we'll see how that goes.
Is that your car?
No.
And it sounds like Cal Arts was worth it.
Yeah, and it's it was absolutely worth it. But a big part of me going there was like, I wanted to be a product of what they were doing, if you will. And that's why I didn't like USC. And don't get me wrong, I think it's a fantastic program. And I would love to, go there and get what they are offering. But what Cal Arts offered was exactly what I wanted. And I think I saw a video from the dean of it, and he was saying, people come here because they want what we're doing.
Right.
And I saw that after I graduated. And I was like, he's right. Because I was like, of all the programs I've looked at, that is what I want. I want to be this. I want to go in that direction. So I think when you're shopping for a program, it's like, man, just dig into them. I've had a lot of friends, they were artists and animators, and they followed, it's big in Southern California because the teachers, will teach at multiple schools. And then these kids or young adults will travel, like, oh, now I'm going down to Long Beach because this guy is there and I want to learn from that guy, and I can take one class at that community college. And so it's like, there's a situation where it's like, well, it's not an inferior product because there's a specific teacher.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So it's like a lot of it has to do with like seek out the teachers that you wish to learn from. I just happened to like that program and what they were doing and where I wanted to go. And I feel like it was the best vehicle to get me there.
Do you have like your top film composers that are just your heroes?
Man, Christoph Beck.
Christoph Beck, tell me about him.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Actually, it was interesting because probably one of the scores that no one's heard of and nobody cares about was absolutely my favorite one. Do you remember the film Elektra with Jennifer Garner?
Vaguely. I don't even know if I saw it. I
That's
remember
what
when it came
everybody
out.
says.
Yeah.
And it didn't do well. But to me, it's a fantastic film. And I would be guilty to say that, a chick, in outfits like that is definitely going to draw my attention, especially as a young, 18-year-old at the time when it came out. But what really blew me away was he worked with a DJ on that. And so he's a very accomplished, orchestral writer. Actually, he's a USC guy. And so he did his orchestral stuff, and he had a DJ, and then he had the DJ kind of sample his original pieces for that. And then they kind of blended it, and it had this really unique sound. It's a little bit more common now, but I think it was the film was in 2005, if I recall. But man, so he really had blended electronics and orchestra in a way that I just thought was unbelievable and fantastic.
Right, and those are your two areas.
Yeah. And that was actually right when I was studying at Cal Arts. But he's definitely a favorite, for sure.
How does the indie filmmaker find a composer that's willing to work with his limited budget?
There's so many composers looking for you guys.
Really?
We're trolling all the film festivals. We're like, hey, you a filmmaker? You filmmaker? You know,
Yeah.
but the guys are, the guys that, I know a lot of guys that are like, trying. They're like, man, where do I find all of you? And it's like, there's forums, there's, all the different groups, Facebook groups and, Twitters and, all that kind of stuff. It's like they're out, everyone's out there, and like it would be cool if there was a little bit more of a connecting, and there's a lot of events here in Los Angeles. Once you get here and you get a part of, the groups that you're in, your Writers Guild and my Composers Union, all that kind of stuff. They set up events and they set up, mingling, social things like, hey, you guys need to talk, So they exist. And like, even I think you and I had met at one that was, an industry mixer. It's like, that's where I go because I want to meet other people. But everyone is trying to find those opportunities to meet other people and to grow with them. And you need each other.
I was thinking about this. Scores for films have existed longer than dialogue.
Right.
During the silent film era.
Yeah, silent film era.
You'd go watch the film, and there would be a live orchestra or a guy on a piano playing along to the pictures on the screen.
Yeah.
Long before there were mics and
a little bit of a jam band type score, but yes.
Totally. Well, they issued music. I know this because my dad has some of the old ones, and they would send them out. So, the same guy would be playing the same tune that they were in the next town. But,
gotcha. I didn't know that they actually coordinated a little bit. That's impressive.
Yeah. They would send the film out, silent film era, and they'd send the music out. And there were certain guys. Yeah. Literally, before people were talking in movies, movies were scored.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was this great, it was a competition, composer competition they were doing. It was at TMC or Turner Classic, TCM, Turner Classic Films, or
Turner Classic Movies. Yeah.
And they were basically taking the old, silent films and then basically throwing it out to young composers to say, rescore it.
Whoa.
And then they would pick one and they would actually hire an orchestra and they would get it a brand new face. It was brilliant because there's some of those films are fantastic. I'm a huge film fan. Actually, Alfred Hitchcock is one of my favorite filmmakers. Bernard Herrmann did a lot of his work. One of my favorite composers. Bernard Herrmann did a lot of Twilight Zone, the whole black and whites. And there's just something about the filmmaking from that era that is just unbelievable.
I know what I wanted to ask. The younger guy out there, the kid out there that is thinking he wants to compose music for films, what bit of advice can you give him?
Experience. One, there's so many education programs that offer that. Don't buy in. And actually, I think I was going for this earlier.
They're phony?
I don't want to say that they're phony, but they're cranking out a lot of people with these degrees, and they're not really bringing to the table, a full deck of cards, we'll say. Technology, everyone can say is the great equalizer. Anybody can get their hands on it, but do you know how to use it? And it's not even like, did you learn the software? And that's why I invested in my education and composition. My degrees in music composition, and I spent my time studying classically, studying the contemporary, works of the 20th century because I wanted to modernize. And I was like, I will learn the technology. And I spent the last I spent many years diving into technology after I focused on my core skill set and as being a composer.
So put in the work.
And it's, And there's plenty of guys that have, they couldn't afford to go to a program or they didn't want to. I think there was a guy that, came from London and jumped on Hans Zimmer's boat and worked for him for, I think 20 years. And then he's finally just in the last couple of years taken off on his own, and he's fantastic. You can learn from people who are doing it, find a mentor, absolutely read up on stuff. You have to. I'm encouraging that you do a program, but just getting a film score, hey man, I studied film score wherever. Yeah, you're gonna find the competition stiff because you're up against guys that are been doing this since whatever age. So ultimately, if you're a young person starting to film or want to get towards that, start writing, for your local ensembles, find people to write for, start work on recording, be able to produce recordings yourself. There's this whole thing, and you have the technology but focus on the skill set, not the technology. The technology will come, it will change, it will grow, it'll do all this stuff. But ultimately, it's your, your skill set. And whatever that is, it doesn't necessarily have to be, I studied for an orchestra. It's like maybe you love being bands There's a lot of opportunities to do film in being, what is it like? All the extreme sports, they want cool rock music or whatever, real upbeat kind of stuff. It's like, I can't do that. Like I could try and fake it, but I know better. I'm going to send along my guy that I know that can do it. So whatever it is, develop your sound, study that, find people that do stuff that you enjoy and learn from that. But also I think there's a balance of education. It's not saying if you get the education, you're going to get it. Because there's a lot of schools that don't exactly, they don't deliver jobs, and then even going to, wonderful programs, it doesn't guarantee you anything. You've got to build, a business, and that's a lot of work. And so, think twice. I think Hans Zimmer has said fairly recently, he goes, if I had kids and they wanted to do film scoring, I would tell them not to. And I thought he was being a jerk. Wow. But I've been working at this for 20 years, and I'm like, you know what? You wish the best for your children, and you don't want them to be suffering like you have. So I could understand that. And honestly, like for me, I'm like, there is no other way. Like if I did anything else, I would be miserable. I'm happy doing this because that's who I am and what I do. It's just the only. And so if you're that person, you'll figure it out. And there's no program that will give it to you. There's no mentor that will give it to you. It's like you just getting off your butt and just start grinding away.
How can people reach you on the internets? Are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter at Dom Aiken. I have my website, domaikenmusic.com.
Well, Dom, thanks, man.
Yeah,
thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Best of luck to you, to all your listeners.
Yeah.
Hopefully I meet some of them.
Dom Aiken Music.
Yep.
.com.
.com.
Well, that's that. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Indie Film Grit podcast, and I hope you're enjoying all of our episodes. Feel free to check out our website for all of the show notes, indiefilmgrit.com, and follow us on Twitter at indiefilmgrit. And if you have a moment, subscribe to us on iTunes. Before I go, I really gotta ask you something. Do you have the courage, the passion, and the perseverance to make indie films? Do you have enough indie film grit?